Good morning, Year 5, and welcome to Tuesday's English lesson. Yesterday, if you remember, we introduced the writing that we were going to be doing for the next 2 weeks, which is all based on science fiction. We're writing a narrative story. And yesterday we used adjectives to write a descriptive paragraph about the settings. Today, we're going to be using the story to identify some subordinate clauses, and then we're going to write in complex sentences using commas to practice these skills. So, first of all, can anybody remember what is a clause? Okay, well, for those of you that can't, a clause is part of a complex sentence. And we have two types. We have a main clause, which makes sense by itself, and then we have a subordinate clause, which won't make sense by itself, but it will add extra information to the main clause. And subordinate clauses do not have to go in a particular place. Sometimes they go at the beginning of the sentence, and sometimes they will go at the end, and they can also go in the middle. Now we can combine clauses to create different sentence types. So if we were just to have a main clause by itself, it's a simple sentence, and we've talked about using simple and short sentences to add effect or to put a bit of dramatic description into a sentence. We also have compound sentences, and that's where we have two main clauses joined together with a conjunction, such as and or but. We can also have a complex sentence, which is a main clause with a comma and then a subordinate clause. However, it doesn't have to go that way round. You could have a subordinate clause, a comma, and a main clause, which is also a complex sentence. There are many other combinations that you might make. So you might think about having relative clauses, and you might like to think about some of the power of three sentences that we've been writing this term. I'm just going to show you a short video to explain a bit more about what a subordinate clause is, just to make sure you're really clear.
Subordinate clauses. A main clause. A clause is a phrase which has a verb as its key word. The other words add meaning to the verb. If a clause works on its own as a sentence, we say that it is a main clause. In this example, each sentence has one main clause. The penguin jumped in the water. It chased a fish. Main clauses can be joined with coordinating conjunctions, such as and, but, and or. The penguin jumped in the water. It chased a fish. The penguin jumped in the water and it chased a fish. A subordinate clause. A subordinate clause helps to give more meaning to the main clause. It cannot exist on its own, as it is not a complete sentence. A subordinate clause often starts with a subordinating conjunction, such as although, because, before, if, since, or when. The penguin jumped in the water. It chased a fish. The penguin jumped in the water before it chased a fish. Before it chased a fish is a subordinate clause. A relative clause. A relative clause is a type of subordinate clause. It is connected to the main clause by a relative pronoun, such as that, which, who, whom, or whose. The penguin caught the fish that it chased in the water. That it chased in the water is a relative clause.
Hopefully now you've got a really good idea about what a subordinate clause is. So look at these clauses from the way back home. He didn't remember leaving it in there. The boy and the Martian could hear noises. The plane lifted off the ground. It had run out of petrol. What was he to do? What type of clause are they? Are they a main clause or subordinate clause? You can tell by whether they make sense on their own. So have a little read. What do you think? That's right. They are main clauses because they make sense on their own. Now have a look at these ones. Gazing into space, but as their eyes got used to the dark, as he was putting his things back in the cupboard. But by the time he got there, after a long night. What type of clause are they? Well, do they make sense on their own? Not really, do they? They add extra information. So these are subordinate clauses. They don't make sense on their own. We would need more information for them to do that. They just add a bit of information to a main clause. So stop and think. What does subordinate actually mean? If we were to look it up in a dictionary, subordinate is a person working under someone's authority or control. It can also, as an adjective, mean less important or lower in rank. So you could try imagining the main clause as the king of the sentence with his crown and his throne, and the subordinate clause is his servant or subordinate. Okay? Earlier we decided that subordinate clause, comma, main clause is the same as a complex sentence. It's what is a complex sentence. So I want you to have a look, okay, at these two clauses. As he was putting his things back in the cupboard, and the boy found an aeroplane. Can we rearrange them to make a complex sentence? Well, we could do, as he was putting his things back in the cupboard, the main clause, comma, the boy found an aeroplane. So that is what he found in the cupboard. Okay, so we've added a bit of extra information to the main clause. Now we can put it the other way round. The boy found an aeroplane as he was putting his things back in the cupboard. So quite often it doesn't matter which way round they go. Sometimes, though, one sounds better than the other, so you need to read your sentences and decide which way round you want to put your clauses. Now, in front of you is a selection of main and subordinate clauses, and I want you to try and link them together to make some complex sentences. So you're going to choose one from the pink list and one from the blue list and put them together. So, for example, I might say, walking across the surface, comma, the stars gave some light to see by. Or, as he gazed through the shadows, comma, the boy could see distant hills. Or you might turn it round. You might say something like, he noticed a trail of footprints before he could take another step. Stop the video, get a piece of paper, and see which sentences you can make putting them together. I'll give you a few minutes. Right, welcome back. Hopefully you've got a list of sentences now in front of you. Now I'd like you to look carefully at this page of the story. This is the bit that we're looking at today. But as their eyes got used to the dark, they both realised they'd met someone else in trouble. They weren't alone anymore. But just imagine, just before that happened, how the boy would have been felt sat on the moon, his torches faded, if you remember the light's gone out, and he was in the dark and he could probably hear things because the alien crash landed on the moon. What would he have felt like? What would it have seemed like? What I'd like you to now do is to try and link some of the sentences that you've already written to write a paragraph to illustrate this part of the story. So, for example, after his eyes grew used to the dark, the boy could see distant hills. Nervously looking around, he noticed a trail of footprints glistening on the dusty surface. Fear rose up inside him. A bead of sweat trickled down his neck. Whose were they? In the blackness, he could hear whisperings all around. Taking a deep breath, he peered deeply through the dark night sky, desperately trying to see who was there. Now, I've used some of the main clauses and I've used some of the subordinate clauses, and I've colour-coded them so you can see where I've done that. And the black writing is where I've added information so that I can link things together and I can add more detail. So what you need to do is to look at the sentences you've created. Could you put them together to write a paragraph to illustrate this part of the story, and add a few bits in order to link it better? I wonder what you can do. Once you've finished writing, then you can go through and self-assess. You can use this checklist to help. So you need to think about, have you used some powerful adjectives? You might want to look at yesterday's list to see if you've included some of those. Have you used a variety of sentence openers? I know in my class I spent a lot of time talking to some of the children about add spice openers, so you might want to see if you can remember any of those. Have you included complex sentences, the ones that we've just written, putting together two clauses? And did you remember to put commas between the clauses? And where you think you have done it, maybe you could jot down the example or underline it to show colour coding it. I look forward to seeing the work from my class later today or tomorrow, and I'm sure the other two teachers in Year 5, Miss Bridges and Mrs. Roberts, are doing the same. So happy writing today. Give it your best shot. Show us what you can do. Goodbye.